Hola, back again. Today I'm going to be doing the U-joints on the rear drive shaft of my 99 Grand Cherokee. They're not really making much noise, but they have 200,000 miles on them, and I have to drive 45 minutes tomorrow. I'd like to make it back. You never know when they're going to go. So it's time. They're cheap. It's not hard. This is what the U-joints look like. They're not very big. These are the kind you could actually grease, as opposed to the sealed ones that you just put in and whenever they wear out, they wear out. So you can see grease coming out of like a little hole there. There's a grease zert in this bag along with new clips, because the old clips will surely have turned to dust by now. And that will all make more sense once I have the drive shaft out. Basically, each one of these is filled with what are called needle bearings. They're needles that are in a line all the way around this, so they rotate. And this goes between the shaft and a yoke and allows it to turn not necessarily in a straight direction. And before any project in the winter begins, you really need several cups of coffee. Not that it really makes you any warmer, but it makes you care less that it's not warmer. You really don't need many tools for this. There's a couple bolts on each end that are holding the drive shaft to the yoke. I can't remember if this particular one is metric or standard. Most of the Jeep is metric, but a lot of the parts that they've been putting on Jeeps for decades, they didn't bother to change, so those are still standard. So for example, the Dana axle shafts or Dana axle assemblies will have standard bolts on them. Then everything in the engine is metric. I'm going to need one of these. I don't remember exactly what size it is, so I grabbed an assortment of metric and standard, a ratchet, and a pry bar, which may or may not be necessary to push the shaft far enough out of the way to get it out of one of the yokes. Okay, I have chucked the back wheel with a brick, and this is because even though the Jeep is in park and it is a four-wheel drive Jeep, when I take the rear drive shaft off, the back end can rotate freely and the front end is limited slip, so this could start rolling. You don't want to be under it taking the drive shaft off and suddenly have it start rolling, especially if it's on a jack, because before it rolls very far it's going to fall on you and then drag the rest of your dead ass along the driveway. Okay, this is where the rear drive shaft meets the rear differential. There are 4 small bolts, 2 there, 2 up there, and the rest of this drive shaft is rigid. You notice there are no bolts on this end. There's a spline that goes into the transmission, and that spline pulls out and in as the rear wheels go up and down. And in theory, when we take the end off this, I should be able to pull this end out of there. We'll see how that goes. Wow, that came out like a dream. None of the bolts were frozen in. That came right out. I don't know what to do with myself. I expected something horrible to happen and use up half my day. And for the record, 5/16. These bolts, and hard to see them in there, and the straps were standard, not metric. Okay, with this out, this will make a little more sense if you've never seen a U-joint. What it does is allows it to move in that direction and that direction. So when it's rotating and it's at an angle, it doesn't bind up. And that little shape right there is one of these clips. Now this has some fluid on it because it's closer to the engine and there's some oil and crap on it. Like, there's no rust on that part. This is nothing but rust. And then you get down here, and I fully expect that those, 1, aren't going to want to come out, and 2, are going to just turn into dust when I try to take them out. We'll see. Well, 2 of them came out fairly easily, and the others didn't. So I have soaked them with my good friend Liquid Wrench, who usually doesn't do anything other than make me feel like I've done something. And we'll let that sit for a bit, and they probably still won't come out, and then I will get out a cold chisel and beat the piss out of them. Okay, this is working fairly well. What I'm having to do on these is take a, this is actually not a cold chisel, it's a punch. I didn't have a cold chisel that small. And normally, take a pair of needle nose pliers and just squeeze this, and the clip comes out. This is frozen in there, so what I'm doing after spraying it with Liquid Wrench is hitting it here and hitting it here until that loosens up, and after that I've been able to get these out. Okay, this is where you need more than just your standard set of tools. This is an A-frame press. I got it at Harbor Freight. It's really cheap. They make floor models, but this is a 6-ton press, and I don't do anything that needs more than 6 tons. What I need to do is push, I don't know, I guess it's called a cap. I need to push the cap down so that it is clear of that knuckle hole. And I have it sitting on a cup so that the one below it can be pushed through. And you could use a large socket. I happen to have this is a ball joint press for an SUV, which, as ginormous as this thing is, I mean, this thing weighs like 20 pounds. I could barely get the ball joints in and out of my Jeep with it. But it comes with several different cups that are made for pressing, so they can stand up to that. So I'm going to press that through and see how it goes. Okay, so forget what I said about a 6-ton press. Go ahead and get a 10-ton. I did get that side to move. That side is frozen in there, and the press is bending itself, trying to get it out. So I'm probably going to end up taking a very large punch and beating on that with a hammer. But I'll at least be able to get it out of the yoke first, and that's nice because I don't want to beat the yoke up too bad. Well, that wasn't a whole lot of fun, but it did come out. There's the U-joint without its caps. Those are the caps. And the stuff that's inside the caps looks less like grease now and more like tar. So I think these were definitely due to be replaced, even though they had not begun making noise yet. It was just a matter of time. So now I've got to get that unfrozen. So I'm going to soak it again with some Liquid Wrench and let it set while I beat up on that end for a while. Well, that sucked. 6-ton press, not looking so good. So now I get to build a new base or buy a new base for that because it's bent beyond repair. So what I ended up doing is actually using my ball joint press with a very long breaker bar and putting it on the floor so the press couldn't turn, and then putting my full weight on the drive shaft so it couldn't move anywhere. And eventually there was a very loud pop and it moved. Yay me. Son of a bitch. Boy, if I had more time and money, I think I would replace this shaft, but it is solid. The insides here are pretty rusty. I'm going to take a brake cylinder hone and hone these down until they are nice and smooth. But I will do that after I deal with you. Okay, just so you know what I'm doing to get these things loose to begin with, I'm taking one of the old caps and setting it in there, and then hitting it really hard with a BFH. Big freaking hammer. Okay, so beating it with a sledgehammer got it to move, and then using the ball joint press, I got it pushed through as far as it will go. Now I need to pull this out the rest of the way. Of course, it doesn't want to go. So, I'm going to put it in a vise. Now this is kind of a small vise, and it was made by the same high-quality corporation that made that. It was very inexpensive. But what it's going to allow me to do is rotate this. I can't hold that in the camera at the same time. Rotate that back and forth and slowly pull it out of there, and after that I can get the rest of the U-joint out. I win. Well, that was the horrible part that I didn't expect, that I mentioned when I was taking it off and said something stupid out loud like, "Wow, that was so easy, I can't believe it." Yeah, these were definitely ready to go. They're not making any noise, but they are total rusty pieces of crap. Incidentally, these are what the needle bearings look like. They're just like little round sticks of metal. And those are what are stacked up inside of these. Probably can't see them because the light's horrible and the phone's not focusing. But anyway, as I was beating on these, some of them fell out. So now, I think it's lunchtime. But after that, I'm going to clean this thing up, hone those holes that the caps go in, and then put the new ones in, and then I can put it back on. One more thing, as you can see, the simple list of tools that I began with kind of grew over the course of the project, including my ball joint press, which has come in handy in a lot of ways. Okay, this is a cylinder hone. These are brake cylinders, basically anything that's small or larger. And I'm going to use that inside of there to clean that up. Now I could do this with a piece of sandpaper and the rest of my life, but the cylinder hone will make short work of it. And in fact, you can actually take this and roll sandpaper around it. So you make a tube of sandpaper and do that first if you've got some heavy deposits, which I do, so I'll probably do that. And that will get the chunks and bits out of there. And then I'm going to hone it nice and smooth. Alright, these are looking a whole lot better. There's still some rust in there, but it's at least smoothed down and honed now. I have this tool that I made out of a dental pick that I got at a swap meet, and this is a handle off an X-Acto knife. And this is perfect for getting in here and scraping out all the little bits of crap that are going to get in the way. Make it hard for us to put these things in. So now I'm going to clean the scale and stuff off of this, since I've got it off the Jeep, and coat it with Eastwood's rust encapsulator, and then put it all back together. Alright, I used a wire brush tool on the drill and removed as much loose rust and dirt as I could. I cleaned the whole thing with xylene and then soaked it in rust encapsulator. So that thing shouldn't get rusty again for a while. Now it's finally time to put the new U-joints in. Alright, my morning project turned into an all-day project, as most of them tend to do. Even putting the new ones in was a pain. I had to really reef them down to get them down far enough to get the clips in. These last two don't have clips. Those are held on by the straps I took off from the yoke in the rear differential. The whole thing has been encapsulated in chassis black. I cleaned up the yoke. That one's all in. One thing I noticed when I took this out was a complete lack of grease. Now the splines and the surface should be greased, because as the rear end goes up and down, this moves in and out of the transmission. And if you don't have grease in there, well, it's like any other two metal parts rubbing together, it's going to wear out. So I'm going to use some high temperature multi-purpose lithium grease. I'm going to grease it up really good, and That shaft should be good for another 200,000 miles. Almost makes it worth it. Well, like every other project I tackle, this should have been zip-zop in and out, and it's now 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I started at 9:30 this morning. Took an hour for lunch. Yeah. So the main problem I ran into were the caps from the old U-joints being completely rusted into the drive shaft. If it wasn't for that, everything went pretty well. So it's back on the vehicle. I'm done. Hopefully I won't have to touch it for another 200,000 miles.